This is my true story. After my wife passed away, my world became small, just me and the house we built together. My son was my only family left, my only reason to keep going. I trusted him more than anyone. I never thought he'd hurt me. But one morning, I found out something that shattered me. My son sold my house without telling me. My home, my memories, my life, and the person who came to claim it wasn't who I expected. What happened next changed everything. Before I tell you what she said, tell me where you're watching from and please subscribe so my story can reach more people. That house was my everything. It was not just a building. It was my entire life standing under one roof. I built it with my hands, one brick at a time, back when money was short, but dreams were big. Every corner had a story. Every wall carried laughter, tears, and love. My wife used to sit by the kitchen window, humming softly while the sun fell on her face. That small corner is still bright in my memory. The sound of her bangles, the smell of her cooking, the way she looked up and smiled whenever I came home from work. All of that lived inside those walls. The house was not just built of cement. It was built of years, built of love, built of sacrifice. I still remember the first time my son learned to walk on that floor. His small feet touched the tiles like they were the whole world. His first words were spoken in that living room. His school books, his toys, his drawings, all were part of the home's heartbeat. The garden outside was planted by my wife and me together. She loved roses, and I made sure there were always red ones blooming for her. Even after she was gone, I kept them alive. I watered them every morning, like a prayer to her memory. That home kept me alive after she passed. It was quiet, but it was filled with her. I used to sit on the old wooden chair she chose for me, right near the porch, drinking tea and watching the road. Some days neighbors would stop by and ask how I was doing. I would smile and say I was fine. But truthfully, that house was the only thing keeping me fine. It was my last link to the life I once had. When my wife died, I lost my companion. When my son moved out, I lost my company. The house became the only thing I could talk to. I never imagined that my son would one day look at that home as just property. To him, maybe it was just walls, just a piece of land. To me, it was everything I ever worked for. I had never been rich. I had no big savings or gold. That house was my wealth, my pride, my identity. Every nail, every tile had a part of me in it. Even when it needed repairs, I refused to sell it. People used to offer me money for it, saying the area had grown valuable. I always said no, because how can you put a price on a lifetime? When my son got married, I hoped he would one day bring his family to live here. I dreamed of hearing children's laughter again in the same halls. I wanted my grandchildren to play in the same yard where their father once ran barefoot. I wanted that cycle of love to continue. That was the dream that kept me breathing. But life doesn't always honor the dreams of old men. Slowly, I began to see distance in my son. His visits became shorter. His tone became colder. He spoke more about money, business, and loans. He said times were tough, but he'd manage. I believed him. I didn't know that while I was still sweeping the porch and watering the roses, he was making plans I could never imagine. At night, I would sit in the living room alone, hearing the echo of my wife's laughter in my mind. Sometimes I would close my eyes and pretend she was still there, calling me for dinner. I never thought those nights of silence would turn into nights of betrayal. The home that gave me warmth for decades was about to become the scene of my deepest heartbreak, and I didn't even know it was coming. That house had kept my life together. It held my memories, my love, my sorrow, and my strength. It had seen my best days and my worst. When I looked at it, I saw my whole story written across the walls. I thought it would be mine until my last breath. I thought my son would protect it when I couldn't. I thought family meant safety. But I was wrong. The house I built with love would soon be treated like an object, a deal, a number on a paper. I still remember sitting on the porch that morning, looking at the sky, thanking my wife silently for giving me such a home. I didn't know then that within days, strangers would be walking through the gate, treating my life's work like a listing on the market. I didn't know that the same roof that sheltered me from storms would soon shake from the weight of betrayal. That home was my everything. And losing it, even for a second, felt like losing her all over again. It started like an ordinary morning. I woke up early, made my tea, and stepped outside to water the plants. The sky was gray but peaceful. I remember feeling thankful that I still had a roof above my head and memories to hold on to. Then I noticed something strange. A group of people standing near my gate. They were dressed neatly, carrying folders, pointing at the house, taking pictures. At first, I thought maybe they were from the city council, checking something about property taxes. But when I went closer, I heard them whispering words that froze my heart. This one's perfect. The living space is large. It's worth every penny. I frowned. Worth every penny? I stood at the gate and asked who they were. One of them smiled and said they were buyers. Buyers? Buyers for what? I hadn't put my house up for sale. My tea slipped from my hand and spilled onto the ground. My chest went cold. I told them there must be some mistake. They looked confused, said the house had already been listed and sold. I asked who listed it. One man looked down and said, "The owner's son handled the sale." I couldn't breathe. My own son. The same boy whose first steps I watched on that porch. The same child I carried on my shoulders when he fell asleep. He had sold my house without telling me, without asking, without even warning me. I felt dizzy. The air around me felt heavy. The world I had built was suddenly not mine anymore. I went back inside and sat on the chair near the window. My hands were shaking. I looked at the photos on the wall. My wife's smile, my son as a little boy, the three of us standing proudly in front of this very house. All those pictures now felt like strangers. I asked myself how a son could do this. What kind of heart sells the home where he was born, where his mother was buried, without even telling his father? I thought maybe there was some misunderstanding, but deep down, I knew the truth. The men weren't lying. They had papers. They had proof. I was the one left out. The betrayal didn't just hurt, it hollowed me out. My whole life, I had worked hard so that my son would never struggle. I saved every coin, skipped meals, and worked extra shifts so he could go to school, so he could have a better life. And this was how he repaid me, by selling the only thing I had left. I felt like the floor beneath me was breaking apart. I wanted to call him right then, but I couldn't even move. I just sat there, feeling smaller and smaller with every thought. That afternoon, I gathered my strength and checked the drawer where I kept my property papers. They were gone. My heart started pounding. I looked everywhere, under the bed, in the cupboard, in the files I kept locked. Nothing. That's when it hit me. He had planned this. He had taken the papers quietly during one of his visits, maybe weeks ago, while smiling, while calling me Dad. Every memory of his face twisted inside me. I had raised him with love, and he had turned that love into a weapon. I sat in the same chair until the sun went down. The house felt cold, empty. Even the walls seemed to watch me with pity. For the first time, I didn't feel at home in my own home. I wanted to believe it was all a dream, that I'd wake up tomorrow and everything would be fine. But deep down, I knew it was real. My son had sold my house, my life's work, my memories, my peace, all gone behind my back. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked from room to room, touching the walls, running my fingers over the old cracks, the pictures, the doors. I whispered to my wife's photo, asking her why this happened, why our son had turned into someone I didn't recognize. I didn't get an answer, only silence. The same silence that now filled every inch of the home we built together. When morning came, I looked out the window and saw the same men again, walking around, taking more pictures. I didn't go outside. I just watched them, feeling helpless. The house I built with my hands was now being measured, priced, discussed by strangers. My home was now someone's deal. My son had turned my memories into money. That realization broke something inside me that will never heal. When I finally picked up the phone to call my son, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. I had rehearsed what I would say 100 times in my head, but when I heard his voice, everything inside me went blank. He didn't sound surprised to hear from me. That hurt more than anything. It meant he already knew what I had found out. My voice cracked when I asked him if it was true. He stayed quiet for a moment, then said, "Dad, I had to. You'll understand later." Those words hit me like a hammer. Understand? What was there to understand about being betrayed by your own child? I remember sitting there, trying to breathe, trying to make sense of the world that suddenly stopped making sense. My son, the boy I raised with my bare hands, the boy who held my finger to take his first steps, had sold my home and didn't even have the courage to face me while doing it. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't even say sorry. Just, I had to. That's all. My heart felt like it had cracked in half. I wanted to scream, to ask him why, but all that came out of my mouth was silence. He started talking about debts, about bills, about loans. He said things were difficult, that this was temporary, that I would thank him later. Thank him. Thank him for throwing me out of the house I built with my wife's hands. Thank him for taking away the last piece of peace I had left. I didn't say another word. I just listened to him talk like a stranger, using cold, practical words that sounded like knives. The love was gone from his voice. The respect was gone. Everything was gone. When I hung up, I realized that I wasn't just losing my house. I had lost my son too. I sat there for a long time after that call, staring at the wall, hearing nothing but the echo of my wife's laughter in my head. I wanted her there, just for 1 minute, to tell me what to do. She had always been the strong one. She would have known how to handle this. I looked at her photo and said, "He sold our home." The words didn't even sound real when I said them. The woman in the photo smiled softly, frozen in time, while I broke in front of her. Days passed, and I kept expecting him to come home, to say he made a mistake, to tell me it wasn't true. But he didn't. Instead, strangers kept coming, men in suits, agents, inspectors. They looked at the place like it was just another transaction. They measured rooms, checked walls, asked questions. They didn't even look at me properly. I was invisible in my own house. I wanted to tell them to get out, but what right did I have anymore? My own son had taken that right away from me. At night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing his voice in my head. "You'll understand later." What was there to understand? That he saw me as a burden? That the home where he grew up meant nothing to him? That the memories I protected meant nothing compared to the money he could make? Every thought made my chest heavier. I walked from room to room, touching the walls, whispering apologies to my wife's memory. I told her I failed her, failed the home, failed as a father. One morning, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a letter from the property office confirming the sale. My son's signature was right there next to my name, forged. The shock almost made me drop the paper. He hadn't just betrayed me. He had stolen from me. My own blood, my own child, had put his name on my life's work and taken it from me. I wanted to hate him, but I couldn't. I just felt numb. You can't hate your own blood, but you can die a little inside every time you think about what they did to you. That was the day I stopped trusting people. That was the day I stopped believing that blood automatically means love. Love has to be earned, not inherited. My son took my home, but he also took something I'll never get back. The simple faith that family means safety. I had spent my whole life protecting him, but I never thought I'd have to protect myself from him. I didn't eat that day. I didn't speak to anyone. I sat on the porch until night fell, watching the lights of the city blink in the distance. Somewhere out there, my son was sleeping peacefully after selling his father's life. I sat in the dark, unable to close my eyes, wondering how a heart turns cold enough to do that. I didn't know it then, but the universe was already preparing something for me, something that would show me that not every stranger is cruel, and not every betrayal ends in loss. Sometimes, kindness comes from the most unexpected place. I just had to wait for the knock on my door that would change everything. It had been 2 weeks since I found out the truth, and those 2 weeks felt like a lifetime. I woke up every day with the same ache in my chest, The same silence filling the rooms that used to be full of warmth. I didn't open the curtains anymore. I didn't sit on the porch. I barely ate. I just moved through the house like a shadow, touching the walls, talking to my wife's photo, trying to understand how everything went so wrong. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my son's face, heard his voice saying, "You'll understand later." But there was nothing to understand. He had sold my home, my pride, my everything. I waited every day for him to call, to show up, to explain. But he didn't. Not even once. Then, one afternoon, there was a knock at the door. It was soft, almost polite, but it still made me jump. I hadn't had any visitors since the day the buyers came around. My heart started racing. I walked slowly toward the door, every step heavy, every thought loud. Maybe it was someone else from the real estate office, I thought. Maybe they were here to tell me I had to leave. I didn't want to face it, but I knew it was coming. I had no strength left to fight. I had already accepted that the house was gone. When I opened the door, I expected to see another businessman in a suit, holding documents, cold and expressionless. But instead, I saw a woman. She was standing there quietly, holding a small bouquet of flowers. She couldn't have been more than 30 or 35. Her eyes were calm, kind, and sad, all at once. For a second, I didn't know what to say. She smiled gently and said she was the new owner. My stomach turned. I thought my heart would stop. So this was it, the person who now owned my life's work. I looked at her face, ready to see greed, pride, or indifference. But what I saw was something I didn't expect. Softness. She said she was sorry for showing up without notice. I just nodded, too tired to say anything. She looked at the house behind me, her eyes moving slowly across the walls, the porch, the garden. There was a look of memory in her eyes, like she knew this place somehow. She asked if she could come inside. I hesitated, then stepped aside. I didn't know why I let her in, but something in her voice felt different. It didn't sound like the voice of someone who came to take something away. It sounded like someone who came to return something. As she walked through the house, she ran her fingers lightly over the furniture, the walls, the door frames, almost like she was greeting them. I followed her silently, wondering why she cared so much about a place she had just bought. She turned around to face me, and for a moment, we just stood there, two strangers connected by the same home. Then she said something I'll never forget. "I know what this house means to you." Her voice trembled slightly. I didn't know how she could possibly know that she said she had read the history of the property and recognized the name on the old records. My name. Her eyes softened when she said it. I didn't respond. I was tired of words that led nowhere. But something about her tone stopped me from walking away. She looked at me for a long moment, as if trying to find the right way to tell me something. Then she said, "Sir, I didn't buy this house to take it away from you." Those words made me look up. No one had spoken to me with kindness since this all began. I didn't understand what she meant, but before I could even think, I felt tears forming in my eyes. She placed the flowers on the small table near the entrance and smiled faintly. "I bought it for a reason," she said, "and I think you should know why." Her voice was calm, sincere. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. A small, fragile kind of hope that maybe, just maybe, not everyone in this world had turned cold. That day, the sound of that knock had terrified me. I thought it meant the end. But when I saw her standing there, with kindness in her eyes instead of greed, I realized that life wasn't done with me yet. Sometimes, the same door that lets pain in can also bring healing. I didn't know who she was yet. I didn't know her story. But I knew one thing. She didn't come to destroy what was left of me. She came to change it. The woman stood in my living room, still holding those flowers like they meant something more than decoration. I didn't know her name yet, but something in the way she looked around told me this house wasn't strange to her. She didn't walk like a buyer, didn't inspect things like an investor. She moved like someone visiting an old memory, Her eyes rested on the photographs on the wall, on the cracks in the ceiling, even on the old chair my wife used to sit in. I watched her carefully. I didn't trust easily anymore, but there was something gentle about her. The kind of gentleness that makes you stop before judging. Finally, she turned to me and spoke softly. She said she was the one who had bought the house from my son, but not for the reason I thought. My throat tightened immediately. I didn't want to hear another story about money or property. I had already heard enough lies from people I loved, but her words came slowly, almost hesitant. She said she didn't buy it to take it from me. I didn't understand what that meant. Who buys a house not to take it? She smiled faintly, as if she could see the confusion on my face. Her voice was calm, respectful, the way people used to talk to elders before the world forgot manners. She said she knew what this house meant, that it wasn't just walls and windows, that it was a piece of someone's life. No one had said anything like that to me before. Every person who had come since the sale looked at this house like a piece of land, a business deal. She looked at it like a memory. For a moment, I forgot about everything. My anger, my sadness, my disappointment. I just stood there, trying to understand her. Her eyes looked kind but sad, like she had known pain herself. She walked to the kitchen doorway and stood there quietly. Then she said, "Sir, my name is Jessica." That name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. She said her mother used to work for a family in this very house many years ago. My heart skipped. I looked closer at her face, and suddenly I saw something. A small scar above her eyebrow, faint but familiar. Then it came back to me. There used to be a little girl who played in our yard while her mother cleaned. She would chase butterflies around the rose garden my wife loved. She used to call me Uncle. She used to sit on my wife's lap and eat mangoes from our tree. That little girl's name was Jessica. I hadn't seen her in decades. She was just a child back then, maybe 5 or 6. And now here she was, a grown woman, standing in my house again, holding flowers for me. My throat closed up. I couldn't believe it. She said she had grown up remembering this place. Her mother used to tell her stories about the kindness my wife and I showed when they were struggling. She said my wife helped her mother with food, with school fees, with medicine when she was sick. I had almost forgotten those days. We didn't do much, we just helped where we could. But to her, it meant everything. She said her mother used to tell her that good people build homes not just of bricks, but of kindness. I had tears in my eyes by then. My wife's kindness had found its way back to me through this woman. Jessica said that when she saw the house listed for sale, she recognized it immediately. She came here before even calling the agents. When she found out it was my son who was selling it, she was shocked. She said something inside her told her she couldn't let anyone else buy it. She didn't want this house to fall into the hands of someone who wouldn't respect its history. She said she bought it so she could protect it. And protect me. I stood there, frozen. For the first time in a long while, my heart didn't feel heavy. No one had ever done something like that for me. My own blood had betrayed me, and here was a stranger. No, not a stranger, a grown-up version of a child I once helped. Standing in front of me, saving the home I thought I had lost. I felt my wife's presence in that moment, like she was there, smiling, saying, "See? Kindness always comes back." I wanted to say something, but no words came out. My voice was trapped in my throat, my heart full of emotions I hadn't felt in years. Jessica handed me the flowers and said, "Sir, you helped us when we had nothing. Let me return it now." I didn't move. I just stared at her, holding those flowers like they were made of light. After everything I had gone through, the betrayal, the loneliness, the silence, here stood proof that the world still had good hearts left. That day, the house that once felt like a grave of memories came alive again. The woman who bought it didn't come to take my life away. She came to give it back. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, old photograph. The edges were worn, the color faded with time, but I recognized it instantly. It was my wife standing in the garden, her arm around a younger woman. That younger woman was Jessica's mother. My breath caught. I hadn't seen that photo in decades. My wife had taken it one afternoon after lunch. She said it was to remember the people who make our home warm. I had forgotten about that picture, but Jessica hadn't. She handed it to me carefully, her eyes glistening. She said, "My mother kept this picture until the day she died. She told me never to forget the people who helped us when we had nothing." I stared at the photo for a long time. My wife's face smiled back at me, kind and alive, the same as I remembered. And beside her stood the woman who used to clean our floors, wash our dishes, and take care of my son when we were busy. Her daughter, this same woman standing in front of me now, used to play on our porch, chasing butterflies while my wife clapped and laughed. Memories came flooding back like water from a broken dam. I remembered my wife giving that little girl extra food, sewing her a small dress one winter, and saying, "Every child deserves warmth." I hadn't thought about those small acts in years. To us, they were simple gestures. To her, they were everything. Jessica's voice shook a little as she told me more. She said that after her mother passed, she wanted to honor her by doing something good, something meaningful. When she saw this house listed online, she said, she felt her mother's voice whisper, "Don't let it go." At first, she couldn't believe it was the same address. But when she saw my name on the records, she knew. She said she didn't even think twice. She gathered her savings, spoke to her husband, and told him she was buying this house, not as an investment, but as a promise kept. I felt my knees weaken. I sat down in the same chair where my wife used to read her morning prayers. Jessica knelt in front of me. Placing her hand gently on mine, she said, "Sir, my mother always said good deeds never die. They come back when you need them most." My eyes filled with tears. I had spent weeks feeling like the world was cruel, that love meant nothing, that family only cared when it benefited them. But here was proof that the goodness you put into the world doesn't disappear. It might take years, but it returns, even through strangers. I looked at her and saw not just a woman, but a reflection of everything my wife believed in. Compassion, gratitude, humanity. She told me that when she was a little girl, she always felt safe in this house. She said it smelled of love, that it was a place where kindness lived. Hearing those words broke me. I had been living in the same house, drowning in grief, thinking it had turned cold, but through her eyes, it was still alive. Still the same home that gave comfort to a child years ago. Jessica then told me something that made my hands shake. She said she had already spoken to the lawyer handling the sale. She had transferred the ownership legally under her name, but she made sure the terms protected me completely. She said, "You will never have to leave this house, sir. Not ever." I couldn't speak. My throat closed up. After losing everything, here was someone who was giving it all back without wanting anything in return. She opened her bag again and took out another small envelope. Inside was a copy of an old letter written by her mother years ago. A thank you note addressed to my wife and me. In that letter, her mother had written, "You saved me when I had nothing. If my daughter ever grows up to have something, I pray she remembers to give it back." Reading those words was like hearing my wife's voice again, reminding me that love always finds its way home. Tears rolled down my cheeks, and Jessica handed me a handkerchief. I hadn't cried like that in years, not even when my son betrayed me. Because this time, the tears weren't just from pain. They were from something bigger. From the feeling that maybe, just maybe, my wife was still looking out for me. Maybe she had sent this woman to protect what we built together. The room felt warm again for the first time in months. The air didn't feel heavy anymore. The home that had turned into a reminder of betrayal suddenly became a reminder of faith. I looked at Jessica and realized she wasn't just a buyer. She was a messenger of the kindness we had once given, coming back full circle. I had lost my son to greed, but in that moment, I felt like I had found a daughter born from gratitude. Jessica reached into her bag one last time and pulled out a small brown envelope. She held it out carefully, almost like it was something sacred. I hesitated before taking it because, for a moment, I didn't want any more surprises. My heart had already been through too many. But her eyes told me this wasn't another wound. It was healing. I opened it slowly, my old hands trembling. Inside was a document with official stamps and seals. It took me a few seconds to understand what I was reading. It wasn't a sale agreement. It wasn't an eviction notice. It was a lifetime lease. My name printed clearly on it. My right to live in that house. Forever. I looked up at her in disbelief. My voice wouldn't come out. She smiled softly and said, "You don't owe me anything, sir. I bought this house so no one else could take it from you." I just stared at her, my mind blank, my chest full. She said she knew I'd been through enough pain, that I had lost enough already, and she couldn't stand the thought of the place that once gave her family kindness being taken away from me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. In a world where everyone seemed to take, this woman had come only to give. I asked her why she would do this. She looked around the room and said, "Because this isn't just a house, this is where my mother found her dignity again. This is where I learned what goodness looks like. You and your wife gave her hope when she had none. You fed us, clothed us, treated us like people when no one else would. I bought this home because I wanted to protect the place that gave me my beginning." Her words pierced through the silence of my heart. I hadn't realized that the smallest things we did all those years ago still mattered so deeply to someone. To me, they were acts of decency. To her, they were salvation. I tried to thank her, but my voice broke halfway through. She shook her head gently, saying, "No, sir. You already thanked us long ago, when you gave us kindness without asking anything back." She said she didn't want to change a single thing in the house. She didn't want to move in, didn't want rent, didn't want money. She only wanted to make sure I could live there peacefully for the rest of my life. She said she believed her mother was watching, smiling, proud that her daughter could now protect the man who once protected them. I looked down at the papers again. The legal stamp, her signature, everything was official. She had gone to the lawyer, handled the transfer, and arranged everything in my favor. She even paid off whatever debt my son had tied to the house. Every wrong he had done, she quietly fixed. It was like she came to erase his betrayal with her goodness. I didn't know whether to cry or pray. My heart felt heavy but full at the same time. She walked around the living room once more, her fingers grazing the furniture, the photographs, the old wooden table where my wife and I once had breakfast every morning. She said softly, "This house carries love. You can feel it. I didn't buy it to own it. I bought it to keep it safe." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat was tight and my eyes burned. I just nodded slowly, overwhelmed by her grace. Before she left, she took the same photograph she had shown me earlier, the one of my wife and her mother, and placed it on the wall near the door. She said it belonged there, that their story should stay where it began. Then she bowed her head slightly, picked up her bag, and started walking toward the door. I followed her silently, still trying to understand what had just happened. At the door, she turned around and smiled, saying, "Please take care of the house, sir. It's yours, always has been, always will be." Then she walked away. I stood there for a long time, staring at the gate as she disappeared down the street. My legs were weak, but my spirit felt strong. I looked around the house, the same house that once felt like a burden, now glowing with life again. I walked into the garden and touched the roses my wife had planted years ago. For the first time since all of this began, I felt her presence not as pain, but as peace. Jessica didn't just give me my home back. She gave me something much greater. Faith. Faith that kindness never dies. Faith that even when the people closest to you betray you, there are others who will remind you that goodness still lives in this world. I stood there in the yard, holding the lifetime lease in my hand, whispering to my wife's spirit, "You were right. What we give out always comes back." That day, I realized I hadn't just regained my house. I had regained my belief in humanity. The news reached my son faster than I thought it would. I didn't call him. I didn't need to. The world has a way of carrying truth faster than lies. 3 days after Jessica's visit, he showed up at my door. I saw him through the window before he knocked. His shoulders were slouched, his face pale, his steps slow. This wasn't the confident man who had spoken to me with arrogance weeks ago. This was a man who had finally seen what he had done. He stood outside for a long moment before knocking. The sound of it didn't carry command like it used to. It carried shame. I opened the door, and for the first time in my life, my own son couldn't look me in the eye. He started talking immediately, his words tripping over themselves. He said he didn't mean to hurt me, that things had gone out of control, that he didn't know what else to do. He said he thought selling the house would solve his problems, that he'd planned to buy it back later once things improved. But lies sound different when the heart has already healed. I just stood there, listening quietly. He kept wiping his eyes, kept saying, "I'm sorry," over and over again, like it would erase what he'd done. I didn't interrupt him once. I had nothing left to say to him that I hadn't already cried to the walls in silence. Then he said something that made me look at him differently. He said he'd heard what Jessica had done, how she bought the house not to take it, but to save it, how she had given me a lifetime lease and cleared the debt. He said the news spread among his friends, and people were talking about it. He said everyone was saying that the woman who once worked in our home had more honor than he, the son of the house. That sentence broke him. He started crying harder, and for the first time, his tears looked real. He said he couldn't bear the humiliation, couldn't face the fact that someone outside the family had shown more loyalty than he ever had. He fell to his knees right there on the porch, begging for forgiveness. But I didn't rush to lift him up. I let him sit there because he needed to feel the weight of what he had done. My heart hurt seeing him like that. Not because of anger, but because I knew that deep down, he wasn't born this way. I raised him better. I taught him about honesty, respect, and gratitude. Somewhere along the way, he forgot. The world taught him greed faster than I could teach him values. He thought money made him strong. He thought selling his father's home was just a transaction. Now he understood that a man who sells his roots loses everything, not just his home, but his soul. After a while, I asked him to sit beside me on the steps. He didn't speak. He just kept his head down. I told him that what he had done couldn't be undone. I told him that betrayal from a stranger hurts, but betrayal from your own blood kills something inside you that never grows back. He nodded, tears falling onto his hands. Then I told him something else, that even though I couldn't forget, I could forgive, because I didn't want to die with hate in my heart. I said, "You are my son, you failed me, but I still hope you find yourself again." He broke down completely. He said he didn't deserve forgiveness, and maybe he was right. But forgiveness isn't about what someone deserves. It's about what your heart can carry. Mine was tired of carrying pain. He stayed for a while, talking quietly about how he had lost his job, made bad decisions, and thought selling the house was the only way out. He said he thought I wouldn't understand, that I'd stop him. That's why he did it behind my back. I listened, but nothing could justify what he did. When he stood up to leave, he said he'd spend the rest of his life trying to earn back my trust. I didn't answer. I just said, "Trust takes time." And that was enough. After he left, I sat on the porch for a long time. The same porch where my wife and I once watched our son play, now empty except for my thoughts. I looked at the roses she planted, still blooming despite everything. They reminded me that even when roots are shaken, life finds a way to keep growing. My son's greed had destroyed something sacred, but Jessica's kindness had rebuilt it stronger. I realized something that day. Sometimes it takes losing everything to see what truly matters. My son lost his pride, and maybe that was the lesson he needed most. The house stood firm behind me, untouched, protected. It didn't belong to greed anymore. It belonged to gratitude. And for the first time since the betrayal, I felt peace. I whispered softly into the evening air, "You sold my house, son, but someone else bought it with a heart you'll spend your whole life trying to grow." The days that followed were quiet, a kind of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. The house no longer felt like a burden tied to pain. It felt alive again, like it was breathing slowly, healing itself along with me. I woke up early each morning and opened every window to let the air in. The same air that once carried whispers of betrayal now carried calm. The sunlight fell across the same tiles where my wife once stood, and for the first time in months, it didn't hurt to look at them. I made tea and sat on the porch, the cup warm in my hands, the garden glowing with soft colors. The roses had bloomed again, bright red, tall, proud, just like the day my wife planted them. I whispered her name and told her everything. I told her about our son's mistake, about Jessica's kindness, about how life had come full circle in ways neither of us could have imagined. Every time I looked at the document Jessica had given me, the lifetime lease, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safety. Not the kind that comes from locks and walls, but the kind that comes from knowing that you're still protected by love, even when it comes from unexpected places. That piece of paper wasn't just legal proof. It was proof that kindness still exists in a world full of greed, proof that what you build with goodness can't be taken away permanently. It finds its way back home, even if through someone else's hands. My son began visiting again, not often, but with humility. He didn't come with arrogance anymore. He came quietly, sat beside me, helped me with groceries, fixed the things around the house he once ignored. He was trying, in his own way, to make up for the damage he caused. I didn't make it easy for him. Trust isn't repaired with one apology. It takes time, and sometimes silence. I let him see what regret feels like. I let him sit with it. And in those silent visits, I began to see small changes. In the way he spoke, the way he looked at me, the way he looked at the house. He wasn't proud anymore. He was grateful. Maybe that's what he needed to learn all along. Gratitude. Jessica came by sometimes too, always quietly, never overstaying. She brought flowers, sometimes sweets, sometimes just a smile. She never walked around the house without respect. She treated it like something sacred, not like property. Once she came with her little daughter, who ran straight to the rose garden, chasing butterflies just like Jessica used to when she was small. Watching her play in the same yard, hearing her laughter fill the same air, it felt like time had folded on itself. My wife would have loved that sound. I sat there, watching the little girl spin around, and I thought, this is what home means, not ownership, but life. At night, when the world was quiet, I often sat on the porch with the lamp on, reading old letters or just watching the stars. The loneliness that used to hurt now felt peaceful. I wasn't alone anymore, not truly. The house had its soul back. The same walls that had heard anger and silence were now witnesses to forgiveness and renewal. I could almost feel my wife's presence, soft and warm, as if she was telling me that everything had turned out as it should. There were still moments of sadness, of course. You don't lose a son's trust and simply forget. But with time, that pain softened. I learned to let go of the bitterness and hold on to the lesson I understood now that love isn't about blood, it's about the heart. The woman who once came here with nothing had returned decades later to give me back everything I lost, and the son I raised, who had lost his way, was slowly finding his path again by seeing what true goodness looked like. I began to spend my evenings talking to Jessica's little girl, telling her stories about this house, about the woman who once filled it with laughter, about the roses that never stopped blooming no matter how cold the winter. She listened wide-eyed, smiling, holding on to every word. And for the first time, I didn't feel like an old man waiting for his end. I felt like a keeper of something sacred, a memory, a legacy, a circle of kindness that had come home to rest. That house stood stronger than ever, not because of bricks or money, but because love had found its way back. The betrayal had almost broken me, but kindness rebuilt me. The roof above me didn't just shelter me, it reminded me that life always finds a way to restore what's right. Now, when I sit on that porch during sunset, I don't think about what I lost anymore. I think about what I gained: peace, gratitude, and proof that even after the darkest betrayal, light always returns. My house stands not as a monument to pain, but as a symbol of forgiveness, faith, and the endless return of love. Now that everything is quiet again, I often sit alone and think about how life turned out. I think about the house, the people who came and went, the love that built it, and the greed that almost destroyed it. I think about how it all came full circle, how the same walls that once heard laughter later heard lies, and then, somehow, forgiveness. I never imagined my story would go this way. I never thought I'd live long enough to see kindness return in a world that had forgotten it. But I did. I survived the betrayal. I lived through the shame. And I witnessed the miracle of goodness finding its way back to me. Every morning when I wake up, I walk through each room slowly. I touch the walls, not to check if they're strong, but to remind myself that they still belong to me. The smell of tea in the kitchen, the creak of the floor, the light falling through the curtains. It all feels alive again. There's peace now. A kind of peace that doesn't come easy, but once it arrives, it stays. My wife's photo is still in the same place near the window. I talk to her sometimes, telling her everything that's happened. I tell her that our home was almost lost, but the kindness we showed years ago came back to protect it. I tell her about Jessica, about her little girl, about how they bring flowers every Sunday and sit with me for tea. I tell her that our son is trying to change. She would have smiled hearing that. I often wonder what life was trying to teach me through all this. Maybe it wanted to show me that love doesn't die. It just hides until the right heart finds it again. My son's betrayal broke me, but it also opened a door for someone else's goodness to enter. If he hadn't sold the house, I might never have seen Jessica again. I might never have learned that what we give, even in small ways, never disappears. It travels through time, through people, and it comes back when you need it most. I thought I had lost everything, but I see now that I was being reminded of what truly matters. Sometimes my son visits and helps me in the garden. He doesn't speak much, but his silence now feels different, humbler, softer. I see regret in his eyes, and I also see effort. He knows he broke something he can't fix with words, but he's trying with actions, and I can live with that. I told him once that forgiveness doesn't erase what happened, but it makes space for healing. He nodded, and I think he finally understood. Watching him care for the roses that his mother planted, I see a bit of the boy he used to be, the boy who loved his parents before money blinded him. Maybe he's finding his way back, one small act at a time. The house has changed too. It feels fuller now. Not with things, but with life. Children's laughter returns on weekends when Jessica visits with her family. They call me Dada, and it fills my chest with warmth I thought I'd never feel again. I see my wife in their smiles. I see my purpose again. I thought my story was ending. But life gave me a new chapter. One written not by blood, but by gratitude. When the sun sets, I sit on the porch, the same spot where I once wept in silence. Now, I sit there in peace. The wind carries the smell of roses, and I watch the sky turn orange and gold. I think about the strange way life works, how it can break you one day and bless you the next. My son sold my house without telling me, but life sent someone to buy it back with kindness instead of money. That is something money can never buy. I lost a son to greed, but I found a daughter through gratitude. I lost faith in people, but I found it again in humanity. I lost my sense of safety, but I found peace that no one can steal. Every pain, every betrayal, every tear led me here, to a place of stillness, to a home that stands not just because of bricks, but because of love that refused to die. Now when I look at this house, I don't see betrayal anymore. I see lessons. I see the proof that no act of goodness ever goes wasted. My final thought is simple. My house was sold, but my humanity was bought back, not with money, but with a heart I once helped to save.